Welcome to the fastest stuff in town. Today we'll masech the Chulin daf Mem Dalid. We're going to begin on Mem Gimel Amud Beis by the words Omer Mar, which is 4 or 5 lines from the bottom. So we were learning when it comes to the Machlokas Rab and Shmuel regarding the Turatz HaVeshet. The Turatz HaVeshet is the part which is very, very high up on the esophagus. And there was a machlokas whether it's b'mashahu according to Rav or Shmuel barubo. And then also Rav said that it's makom shchita. Shmuel says that it's rubo because it's not makom shchita. Yet when a case came about, we ended up paskening like both opinions. The stringency of Rav and the stringency of Shmuel, and therefore it became treif. We said like Rav, that said even a mashahu will be enough to make it a treifa, but we also hold like Shmuel, that said that it's not makom shchita. So in this Omar Mar Bereid Ravina Mosvina Tiyufta Kalafi Sino, that the Rabbi, that this is a question literally opposite the enemies of the Rabbi, but this is actually like a Lashon Sagi Nahar, a euphemism going against him himself, because this doesn't make sense that you're going to end up taking upon yourself the stringencies of two totally different opinions when each one themselves doesn't hold of this. We know, and this is brought down by Masechtas Erevin, we paskin machlokas Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, we hold like Beis Hillel. But right to last is Beis Shammai Oisa, Beis Hillel Oisa. You can go like either one. Now this is kind of hard to understand. Well, if you paskin like Beis Hillel, what do you mean you can go like Beis Shammai? So Mikuli Beis Shammai, Mikuli Beis Hillel, Russia. If you want to be Mekel, you can't say, well, whenever Beis Shammai's Mekel, hold like him. Whenever Beis Hillel's Mekel, hold like him. Can't do that. That you're a Russia, like trying to find the biggest heterim out there. Mem Dalin with Alf. On the other hand, if you end up taking upon yourself the stringencies of both, that you're kind of walking like a fool in the darkness. And as we've already seen this machlokas regarding the vertebrae, Rashi reminds us again what this is about. When you have two chumras that contradict, for example, when it comes to the shedra goylus, we know that in order for an animal to be considered to be, or when it comes to a situation of tumah b'ohel, so it has to be, the mace has to be intact, rov binyan, or a skull, or the shedra, the spinal column. Now, what if some of the spinal column, some of the vertebrae are missing? So there's a machlokas what the din is in actually two situations. The other Beis Shammai Beis Hillel says Rashi Gabi oil. The Habilu Beis Shammai Chumra Yomad she techaser trei chuliyos metama b'oil. In other words, let's say all you have is one vertebrae missing. According to Beis Shammai, he's strict and says that you're still tamei b'oil, because even missing one vertebrae, so that's being very strict. Beis Hillel is mekel and says no. If it's missing one vertebrae, then already there's no tumas oil. So Beis Hillel is mekel when it comes to that. V'chein l'treifa. Beis Hillel b'chada chulya havi chisaron. But treifa, according to Beis Hillel, just like missing one chulya is enough that it's no longer a shedra, so too, if you're missing a chulya, missing a vertebrae, it's enough to make it a treifa, which in that case Beis Hillel is strict. And then Beis Shammai is actually lenient, saying that if there's only one vertebrae missing, it's not a treifa yet. So therefore, Axiel is someone who goes after both opinions, which makes no sense, because you can't hold like Beis Hillel in one case and Beis Shammai in the other, because they contradict one another. Because the same psak could end up depending on what we're talking about, if we're talking about a treifa or an ohel, will have different halachic ramifications. So you can't just pick and choose whoever's machmir. You're machmir, machmir that it's a treifa, a machmir that matami ba'ohel, but they contradict one another. So you can't have that. It's like a fool walking in the darkness that doesn't understand why they're doing what they're doing. And on this, Rashi says, "V'hani de Rabbanami, sarson adadi." It's a contradiction. Kivandi oimer nikuvasai b'mashahu. That there's a machlokus. How big is the hole? A mashahu or roiv? So you say, it's a treifa even if it's just a mashahu. So taima mishum de makam shchitahu. The only reason why is because that's considered to be the place of the shchita. Because makam shchita can become tameh, it becomes a treifa b'mashahu. However, Shmuel is strict and says, no, that area, you can't shecht over there. And that's the reason why he says that, therefore, since it's not the makam shchita, it's only when there's rov. So how could it be that you hold miyut and not the makam shchita, right? So they contradict one another. Ela'i kibes shamai kikulehen v'chumurehen, v'kibes hillel kikulehen v'kichimurehen. So hagu v'kasha. Amr, and this is verbatim from the Gemara in Erevin. First of all, he said lo oyam halacha kidaber beis hillel, which means you have to follow beis hillel. Now you're saying, if you want to hold like Beis Shammai, just be consistent. What do you mean? If the halacha is like Beis Hillel, so kasha. Kan koydem baskoil, kan lacher baskoil. The moisema af lacher baskoil. Rabbi Yeshua diyarma in mashkichim babaskoil. So there's two terutzim. Either what before the baskoil you can go either way. After the baskoil you have to listen to the baskoil, or even after the baskoil we can say we don't listen to the baskoil. And Rashi just quotes the famous Gemara in Masechtas Baba Metzia, Perek HaZahav, about the ovens and Tamei Tahar, and he ended up being put in the Cherem. Okay. Mikol Makom Kash, because the Baskol said that the halacha is like the Chachamim, says, we don't listen to the Baskol. Okay. Anyway, so it's interesting that maybe the teretz is you could not listen to a Baskol, okay, but then you're going to be put in the Cherem. Okay, but that's an interesting kasha on its own. You call makom kasha. Well, again, we're back to our question. How could he take two chumras, one like Rav and one like Shmuel? So Rav Talbus Kula Kareb Ki Rav Abda. Really, he holds completely like Rav. The Chiyasa Rama Recheskel Omer Los Sisul Hu Lahani Kloli. Don't listen to these rules. The Kail Yehuda Achi Mishmei the Rav. Hachiyam Rav. This is what Rav said. Veshet, when it comes to the esophagus, Nasnu Boy Chachamim Shir. The Chamim have a measurement how far it is to be kosher for shchita. Mechlal, the turbets of Veshet, Lav Makom Shchitahu. Now it's pretty clear that if he's saying clearly that the Veshet, that area of the esophagus is the place where you do the shchita, that's mashma the turbets of Veshet, which is above it, is not the makom shchita. Look in Rashi. I feel hachi amarab b'mashahu. Nonetheless, even though the turbets of Veshet is not the makom shchita, he still says a mashahu. Midi de havi gargris de ben b'makom shchita ben shalom b'makom shchita shavashire. Just like when it comes to the windpipe, it doesn't matter if it's the makom shchita or not the makom shchita, the measurements are the same. So too, he holds the same thing. Even a mashahu, even if it's not shalom b'makom shchita. So therefore, it's not really the chumrah of Rav and the chumrah of Shmuel. This is actually, according to him, the interpretation of Rav. Anyway, so that gets us out of that issue. V'kaimer b'mashahu. So the Gemara asks, so how high up can you go on the Veshet? So Rav Nachman ad kedei tfisas yad, enough of what's literally grabbing a handful. Sarach says Rashi haniach l'tzad haroish kisholosh etzba'is va'arba, the hand's breadth, which is the size of 3 to 4 etzba'is. Well, mata ad kama, how far down? So Rav Nachman Amar Rabbi Boravua ad kedei shi sa'er, until it gets hairy. There's a part which it's hairy, the hairy part which connects to the keres hapnimi, the inner stomach. Says Rashi, Sheisham Si'ar Shigayrin Besakin Mikeres Hapnimi, as Rashi says. Okay. Eini, so you're telling me that that's the space of the Makam Shchita of the Veshet. But Omer Ravina, Omer Gavina, got over Ganiva rather, Mishmei Rav. Tefach Beveshet, one tefach by the Veshet, Somach Keres, next to the Keres, Zehu Keres Hapnimi. So amai ki kashachet b'keres kashachet. So it sounds like you're shechting in the keres. If you're telling me it can go all the way further, that sounds like you're going too far down. So ema tefach b'keres samach veshet zeu keres hapnimi. Actually, it's referring to the tefach in the keres, in the stomach, which is near the veshet. That's the keres hapnimi. Okay, so that's a one explanation of how do we get to that. Ibois Ema Kikama Rav Batura, perhaps when Rav said his din is referring to an ox, Dimisair Tfei, that it's hairy more. Says Rashi, Shasair Nichnas Lateicha Veshet Tefach, that the hair enters into the Veshet Tefach, Oh Makam Shchita Havi, but Veshet Ad Makam Se'ar. But really, it does only go into the place of the hair. However, when we're dealing with an ox, the hair enters already tefach more. So when Rav said his din, Mishmei Rav, tefach b'veshet, samach keres, that's referring specifically to an ox. Okay, so it's built differently. Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Shmuel, Turbatz veshet, shenitul kuloi melechi kosher. Now when it comes to the top, which is next to the jaw, and actually the lechi was removed, the jaw was removed, so it's still going to be, it was removed, it sounds like the veshet was removed from the jaw, it's kosher. V'tanatuna, nital lechi hatachta in kosher. If you took the lower jaw, it's kosher. So maskav l'rav papa ve'ikar simonim. Understand, you're ripping it out. So how, if you're ripping out the windpipe, so it should be puzzle. Doesn't make any sense. How could you say this is acceptable? Says Rashi, nital lechi atachtem kivan shenital halechi, when the jaw is removed, nisdu hasimanim shebelechi atachtim. So the simanim, namely the windpipe, is still attached to it. So l'chayra, it gets ripped out. So that should be clearly not good. Or papa kasha. Masnis kasha masnisin nitil lechi hatachtain kosher. So it says that again, that's kosher. So bishlam masnisin rapapolo kasha, maybe is not really a kasha. There are two different types of ripping out. Ha di akar ikuri, ha di igmam agumi, mi oloi simonim. So what ended up happening? If only the lechi, the jaw, was removed, but the flesh remained, and the veshet was connected to the basar, then the shechita is still going to be kosher. But if the flesh was removed, then it will be a problem. So look at Rashi. Ikar simonim shenekar haveshet min alechi min basar. If it's all ripped out, then it's not good. However, igo megumi me'uli simonim shemigamim halechi min basar, that the jaw is removed from the flesh. Shemutal al simonim, but the flesh is still connected to the veshet. Bein halechi v'asimin delav ikarhu shasimonim ma'urim b'basar. As long as that the simonim, the veshet, is still attached to the flesh, so that's not considered to be ripped out. So there's ripped out, and then there's really ripped out. El Shmuel kasha lo temakul el ema ruboy. So again, according to Shmuel, it's a kasha. Why? Says Rashi, Hadu Rapapo, they did Iker Simonim, the Kaimer Turbat Veshet, Shenito, the Mashma Shaveshel Vadai. We're talking about the Veshet itself was taken out. So my answer is, it depends if it was all taken out or the majority. If it was the whole thing, you're right, but a majority, no. The Yomer Rabba Bar Chana Yomer Shmuel Simonim Shenidaldalu Baruban Treifa. But it says even if the majority of it is ripped out or dangling, it's going to be Treifa. So Rav Shisha Beredu Av Idi Ha di akval ikpuli, ha sam di afgor afkuri. So one is if it was peeled by force, then it'll be kosher. The other one, it was peeled by without force, then it is kosher. One is it was peeled with force, it will be no good. It will be puzzle. Says Rashi, it was ripped out forcefully. Kedavar haneker b'koyach. It was ripped out. Even the majority is still there. Sheneker kan ma'at ad rubo, until the majority oisa miyata mechuber ein mechuber biyachad hilkach while chibrahu to hadir bari. It's not going to get better. So if it was ripped out forcefully, then that becomes a problem. If it's only non-forcefully, then it's still going to be kosher as long as there's some there, even the robe was removed. So rove, fine. So that's what we're talking about. All right. So maybe we have a question. We have a question over here. Let's see. Nope, not that. Okay. So, and then in the Mishnah, among the Yudchas Trefus, it says, Upoisekes hagargeres. If the gargeres, the trachea, the windpipe, the kana, is ripped out. So, Tana kama pisoikes hagargeres, how much is it torn? So, Gemara says, Baruba, the majority of it's torn out. So the kamaruba, and how much is a rove? So Rav Oimer, as we continue on with Beis, Rov Uvia, the majority of its thickness was torn. The Amila Rov Chalala, the majority of the cavity, which is more makel because the cavity is larger. So if we look at this picture over here, we can see that this picture demonstrates what it looks like. The kana, the windpipe, which is large, and over here we also see, by the way, the veshet, the esophagus, as we said before, the different colors, how the outer layer is red and the inner is a whiteness to it, as you can see. But here we're going to be focusing on the kana, and we can see how the kana is shaped, and obviously, you could be dealing with the majority of its the majority of its width, or the majority of its airspace, which is much larger. Another view, so we've seen this picture before, of looking at the veshet, or actually rather looking at the kana, is this picture here, which we spoke about, whether it must be cutting in the tabas hagadoila or possibly any of the tabois. Remember, the tabois hagadoila is completely surrounded. The other tabois are like a U. They're not completely cut, and therefore maybe you have to cut in between them, or maybe only the tabas hagadoila. So again, this is the shape, and this is what this looks like inside. Okay, so with that said, again, there's this machlokas, or is it rov width or rov airspace? Okay, so if we look in Rashi, yesh oimrim rov oivi hadaifen, the width of the thickness of the walls, alpha p shlo higil chalal, even though it hasn't necessarily reached to the airspace. Okay, b'shibashu. Okay, ayin Rashi. Rov chalala, the cavity, einu treifa ad shiyavsik rov hachalal. So we can see that rov chalala is actually a kula. It's less. It takes more to do that. V'oivi ha-tanuch einu mashal maroiv. Okay. Anyway, so let's understand this. Ahi pesekas hagargris. So there was a situation where the windpipe was cut. The asolik made the Rabbi Yosef badikle Boroiv Ovya. So he ended up saying that it's the majority of its thickness, which again is a more strict opinion. So Amali Rav Kahana Rav Asil Rav Lemantenu Rabbeinu Boroiv Chalola. I thought it was actually supposed to be the majority of the cavity, which is more makel. So Shadra Kameh de Rabba. So Rav, who was the one who was looking in this, sent it in front of Rabba Bar Chana, and Badka Boroiv Chalola Biakshra. So in fact, he was baidik it, and he made it kosher by Rav Chalal, which again is more lenient. V'zovin minei b'tlayasar istri pshiti bisra. So he ended up, he got a cheap price for the meat after apparently he paskined that it's kosher, which seems a little bit troublesome how he was able to do that, but nonetheless that's what he did. Okay. So we have a few problems with this whole story. First of all, if he already thought to paskin that it should be Rav Ovyoi, Rav did, so how come after it was sent to Rabbah, he changed and he ended up saying a more lenient opinion to make it kosher, to be matahir? Aser in chaver rishoy lahater. So how did that work? How is that allowed? Rav didn't actually say and paskin that it should be Rav Ovya. It says he was bodik, and he noticed Baroiv Ovya. He noticed it was cut to the majority of its thickness. But didn't mean that because of that he says, oh, therefore it's treifa. He didn't say that. So if you would have already paskin, this is a treifa, then you can't bring this to another person for a more lenient opinion. But that's not what happened over here. But if, let's say, the question was even posed to a chacham, I thought we should be strict and never eat anything in which is even a question. After all, v'haksiv, as we saw this already before, v'oimer ahei Hashem Elokim hini nafshi lo matoma v'nevel v'treifel achalti. He was like a big flex over here. That what happened? He said, I never ate nevela, I never ate treif in my whole life. It's like, shkoich, I never went to McDonald's. Wow, you're a big tzaddik. Okay, most people that live in Long Island, in Brooklyn, there's a couple of McDonald's, but there's 99 kosher restaurants everywhere. It's a big deal. It's a big flex to say you didn't eat not in kosher food. It's not such a big deal, but that's an interest. Obviously, that's not all is being said here. Menurai Piad Ata, from the time I was a kid until now. Befi Buster Pigel, and I never put in my mouth meat that was pigel, which of course is something which is an improper machshava that a Kohen has, so that food obviously is not going to be good. Hini nashi lul matoma, and I never. So what does it mean? All these different things. He says, first of all, I was never tameh. Shlohi harti b'yoyim l'v'dituma b'layla. In other words, I was able to safeguard my mind to not have improper thoughts in the day, so that I wouldn't end up having done anything like becoming a zav or balkari at night. And the veil of trevel achalti shlo achalti baser kais mi'oilam. I never ate food that was kais, which we ended up saying is food that was about to die. V'loba b'fi baser pigel. This is what we're bringing this down over here. Shochalti mebehema shahir b'chacham. Right. So I was strict that I would not even eat meat in which a chacham had to been asked what's the status of it. So I was so careful that not only, of course, I didn't eat it nevel and treifel, but the chiddush is that not even something that was a shaila that maybe it could have been, even though the chacham paskin is kosher, I still wouldn't eat it because there was even a possibility. So then how could he have eaten this if there was a possibility that this was not a good shechita and it was a treifel? And the chiddush was that even though he was a kohen, he still didn't eat from this, even though there was no gifts. It wasn't taken off the proper matanais. But again, as a kohen, you could eat it anyway. So anyway, you have the kasha. How was he able to eat this if there was a psak? So hani mili milsa detali besvara. That's only based on a chacham's own understanding. that he may have erred, so therefore that's why you wouldn't do this. You wouldn't eat it. However, Rabbi Rachana Agmri Samach, when it comes to him, but this was based on an accepted halacha that we only measure by Rov Chalala, right? A more lenient opinion. So v'tebegli mishum chshada. So how is it possible that he himself went to buy this food, which seems to be he ended up buying it at a cheaper price because of his psak? Desanya donas adin zicha v'chat donas adin, your judge. Zicha v'chiyev timi v'tiher as v'hiter v'chein ha'edim she'idu. When it comes to the witnesses, kulon rishayin likach. You could technically purchase and afterwards you can buy that item that was questionable. You should always distance yourself things that look ugly. So people aren't going to say, "Oh, I know why you said this. You paskin this way because afterwards you wanted to buy it." Even though it's not true, you paskin and you're a witness with authenticity, but doesn't make any difference. We don't want you to start looking bad. So the question is, how could he have purchased this meat after he paskin that it was kosher? Doesn't seem like that should be allowed. So Gemara says, Kiha de Rabba Shari Terfasa, the Zavin Mini Bisra. We find the story of this person that he mattered something which seemingly was not kosher, then he sold it. So Amrulei Bas Rav Chista Abba Shari Bukhra Velo Zavin Mine Bisra. So this says Rashi Kishahi Kayin Mevel Fun of Bechor Lirois Muman. A Kayin will go and show whether or not this Bechor, this firstborn, has a mum. So Rashi says, because Bechor Noig was manazeh. Ukshutam in Roy Laklum. The Shaykh Kachim Bechutz. So you have to wait until it has a blemish on it. So Maran says, Hanamili Bukhra Yashumam is Davin. When it comes to the case like a Bechor, this firstborn animal, it's done through evaluation, and therefore it's not an absolute price. However, over here, Hacha Miskala Moichiach. Over here, the meat was weighted, and therefore that's proof that he wasn't doing any favors. So again, when it comes, typically speaking, you wouldn't be able to do that. However, the fact that he purchased it for a certain amount of, based on the amount of pounds, it was weighed, and everyone knows that the meat costs $20 a pound. So obviously, there was nothing that was improper over here. So my ika mishum umsa mal yasa. So what do you want to tell me? Because it was like good meat. So kayama umsa mal yasa zamnuli. It was always this was something which was always done in the past, having this high quality good meat. Okay, fine. Let's slow down just for a second. The next piece is kind of a gadata, but I think we hit upon a few things. Question 10. Chacham shahira heter b'treifa, oba b'chor, right? He says about a treifa or a b'chor, he muter lo liknais mibsar. Can you buy the meat? Ma'atam. So as we saw, a treifa is muter, but b'chor is aser. Why? But buy a b'chor, nimchar b'shuma. It's sold based on evaluation. That maybe the price was lower as like a reward for his psak. But when it comes to meat of chulin, which is sold by weight, there's no reason to have that chshad. And I think these questions are going to pop up again. TA 12. It's pretty vague the way it's written, but this is what they wanted to write. Im hayra masfar. Oh, could you? Let's read the question. Question 12. Maybe you shouldn't eat it. So according to this, TA12 is different. It's only besvara. Based on the Chacham's own understanding, he might have made a mistake that you can't do. However, if it's an accepted psak, then it's okay. The im hayra migamayra in chumra. So that's the answer to that. TB 15. That's the same question as TA 12 is TB 15. So that is Mem Daled Mabez. TB 15. Let's see what I wrote. Misvara yesh leimer shel eichel. Avol hacha yesh gemara tradition shezeh halacha b'roiv chaloloi v'oz insar chahachmer b'oifen hazeh. Good enough. All right, let's finish this daf with a little bit of a gadita. Okay. Rav Chisda. Ezu Talmud Chacham. Who's someone who's a Talmud Chacham? So maybe someone who learns a lot of Gemara, someone who learns a lot of Chumash. Zeroy Treifel Atzmai. This is unbelievable. Someone who, his own animal, in which maybe you could say Taka should be kosher, he was strict upon himself. That's a Talmud Chacham, not a Yerushalayim. The Talmud Chacham is not just someone who knows how to learn. It's someone that practices what they learn. Someone who is someone that literally who accepts gifts, hates gifts rather, that you'll live. So zeh haroy treifel atzma. Same thing. That basically, again, you distance yourself from anything in which is possibly not kosher, and you yourself says it's treif, which you could easily say, no, it's mine. Says Rashi, Kishe Noilet Sufik Treifus Bebehemtoi. When there's a doubt, the Nirubo Talmud Isser, the Talmud Hatir, because you know it could be mutter, it could be usr, because you have all this knowledge, Veinu Chasaleha, you don't have mercy upon yourself, usr, and you're strict. So that's a Talmud Chacham. Haroy Treifel Atzmo, says Rashi, Vadi Saini Matanus, Achermu. Obviously, you don't like other people's gifts. Shiafal Shaloi Enu. You could maybe come up with a reason to say it's lenient, so you're strict even on your own things. So to take other people's things, you certainly aren't going to do. Anyone who learns Chumash and learns Torah, Mishnah, and they paskin upon themselves, the Shimish Tam Chachamim, which typically means that they learn Gemara. That you work hard and it'll be praised for you and good for you. You have 2 worlds. Which is also quoted in Pirkei Avos. It says on the side over here. Rabbi Lezer kihavi mishadrule mebenesiya midi lo shakel. He wouldn't accept gifts. When he was invited to go there, he didn't go there either. He said, "Look, a boy, mar diichye. You don't want me to live? What are you trying to do? You're trying to give me gifts. You're trying to invite me. Don't you want me to live?" So it's a very interesting vart. That if you're a freeloader and all you do is take things from people, take, that's not life. Life is about being independent and accepting responsibility for yourself. Rav Zera kimishadrule lo shakel. He didn't take anything. He have a mizavle yozl, but he actually Taka would go to eat with them. So why? Why would he do that? Omar, he said, Mem Hayman Aleph, he said, Iskairu hu diskaru bi. Says Rashi, Nechabdin haim b'masheni sayyid atzalam. I'm actually honoring them. B'hanosim hi v'einzu matana. So sometimes taking is really giving, right? The fact that I'm there, it seems like I'm taking, but the truth is I'm going and they get so much hana from my presence because of who I am, so therefore it's okay. Adkan.